it's Tommy Allen from TommyAllenMusic.com. Welcome. This week we have Aynsley Lister, the British blues rock guitar player from Leicestershire. During this interview, we was having such a blast, we totally lost track of time, and bam, 3 hours later the battery died. So I managed to edit all this down to 2 episodes. You've got part 1 today and part 2 next Wednesday right here on Tommy Allen Music. If you're enjoying the interviews, please leave a comment below. Please hit the subscribe button because that helps the channel progress. So we're going to jump straight into this with Aynsley with part 1. Let's get to it. Thank you very much, Aynsley, for being a part of this and coming on board and, you know, giving up your time to chat.
Yeah, pleasure.
So I've done some research. Obviously, I've known of you because we're similar age and similar style of music on the circuit.
Yeah.
And but really, in all fairness, we've not really crossed paths at all, have we? You know.
Not really.
No.
I know we've kind of like bumped into each other a couple of times on the circuit, like festivals. We're always kind of like passing in the corridors or whatever. But we've never played together or anything.
No. And it's, you know, it's a shame really because, you know, it's, I think it was the same with Ian Parker, you know.
Yeah.
You know of everybody, but you don't really get to hang out. And Danny Bryant and all us lot around the same sort of age. But it's, you know, it's a shame we don't all do something, all of us together, you know. I think it'd be quite a fun night. But anyway, I've done some research and you were born in November 1976 and you started playing at the age of 8. Is that right?
That's right.
So what was your first introduction into music?
Probably before I was born.
Right. Okay.
To be honest, my parents are really musical. My dad, then they don't play music. They don't play it. They're not instrumentalists or anything or singers. But my dad's always been a music fan, and so every day, like his thing is he has the stereo on every single day. And so I suppose even when even before I was born, I was kind of just hearing all these kind of sounds. And I don't know, it just resonates with you, doesn't it? It's just something you grow up with, and it just becomes the norm. So my dad's record collection was always spinning every evening, every day. And there's even pictures of me in the family album where I'm about 3 or something. I'm sat in a little chair and I've got these massive headphones on. I'm just sat staring at the stereo, and I'm obviously listening to, I don't know, AC/DC or something. But so even before I started playing guitar, I was just into the sound of it, and it just kind of caught my attention really. So started from there.
Okay, and why the guitar then? Why not piano or what? I mean, was it a present or was it a choice or?
The guitar, because my dad's really into guitarists.
Okay.
And when he was in his late teens, early 20s, he would go around all the London clubs and see bands like. He's into like blues, so you'd see like Clapton, saw Hendrix a few times, Fleetwood Mac, Free, all these bands that I suppose a lot of them when they started out they were just playing in the clubs around London, and before they all got huge and became massively famous. And even Hendrix, when he was at his peak, my dad sort of went to see, he's been to the Albert Hall to see Cream and all that sort of thing. So my dad was kind of part of that scene where he would go and watch these bands and go on watch these tours. And so my dad likes a really good guitar solo. So a lot of the music that he would play would have this guitar in it, either riffy stuff like ZZ Top or AC/DC or something like that. But it was all kind of guitar-y music. Not just that. I mean, there was other stuff as well, but kind of bluesy, rocky R&B, as in like the old kind, not the R&B you get these days, but
yeah.
Although my dad has got a very eclectic music taste. I mean, he's into everything. He's all MP3 players now, and his albums are all like packed away somewhere. And he's got everything on it, every genre, every style you can imagine. And he has kind of, I suppose his taste is really wide. But the stuff that I was listening to, and the thing, I suppose my dad had a guitar, which was always on top of the wardrobe, and I never actually saw him play it. And as a kid, I would just see this thing and I was fascinated with it, and I would just ask him to get it down, and I would just play with it, twang the strings, just turn the tuner pegs and snap the strings, and then he'd have to put some more strings on, and I'd break those, and then one day I dropped it, and the head broke off. I think I was about 6, maybe 7. I was really upset, and I thought my dad's going to kill me. And I just basically said, look, I owned up, and I said, look, I've dropped your guitar. It's in 2 pieces now, connected by lots of strings. I really, really want to play. I really want to learn to play properly. So can I have a guitar for my birthday that's my own guitar? And then I promise I'll actually learn to do it properly and stop messing around. And so, yeah, that's when I got my guitar for my birthday.
And what was it? Was it acoustic or electric?
It was a 3/4 sized nylon strung Spanish guitar
with the high action.
Yeah, it was like cheap. It wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't a premium brand. Let's put it that way. And it was just a generic, just 3/4 size thing. And I went and joined the school guitar club.
Okay, is that after school sort of thing?
Yeah, but I got really bored of it really quickly because they just wanted to kind of just strum on like a D chord, and she's coming round the mountain when she comes, and I thought, no, this is very different to the music I've heard at home. Yeah. So of course I got this little Spanish guitar, and I started trying to work out and trying to play along with my dad's records, and that's the first thing I did. I would just work out solos note for note, and I would just on a string. I don't know if you can hear this, but I just find a note that that sounds quite similar, and then I'd find it. And to start, it was all on one string. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know any chords or anything. And he kind of just started from there. So yeah, very quickly I got just bored with the lessons at school because it was just kind of very generic and very kiddie-ish, I suppose. And then I just kind of just took it into my own hands really, and went from there. And I got my first electric when I was 10, which was a Strat copy. And then from there I kind of
then you got when was Old Red then?
I got that when I was 12.
Okay.
The red Strat was my first decent guitar.
Okay.
Because I had this nylon strung cheap thing, and this Strat copy. I think it was called a Marlin Slammer. I even remember this because it was for Christmas just after my 10th birthday. This Strat copy, and I remember it said on the box, I think it said $69.99, including amp and cable and pick and all this sort of thing. So you got the whole package for 70 quid. But I always wanted a Fender because I'd seen Clapton and Martin Knopfler playing them, and then one day we decided to go and buy a guitar case, one of the Fender cases, for this cheap Strat copy. And I was 12 at this point, but the case that they were selling us in the shop was going to cost more than the guitar package had cost 2 years earlier. And the guy basically says, well, look, he says, I can throw you a guitar in with it for another 220 quid. I remember it was 269 £269 for this red and white Japanese Strat, and this Fender molded. It said Fender like molded into it, and that's what I'd seen, and that's what we went into the shop for, and we came out with a case and a guitar,
right? And
that was a start really.
And what was the first guitar solo you sort of can remember picking out?
I remember exactly what it was. It was Eric Clapton, I Shot the Sheriff.
Oh, okay.
Because my dad had an Eric Clapton live video concert. It was on Betamax. This is how old it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody went and bought VHS video recorders. My parents bought a Betamax because apparently it was better quality. Anyway, obviously that died at that. But this Eric Clapton Live 85, it was called. It was one of the last periods where he was playing that black and white Strat he used to play. It was recorded in London, I think, and it was on Betamax. So I would play that and run it back, and I would play it repeatedly over and over again. And of course, you could stop it and run it back, and you could watch where his fingers were going. And there's a solo that he plays on I Shot the Sheriff. It was the third track of the set, and Can you hear that?
Yeah, we can hear it, definitely.
So obviously, if you've got so I mean I'm tuned down here, but so if that's the groove, and then his solo went like this. That was the first line. That was the first phrase I ever learned, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but I'd actually learnt that when I was about 9. So this is when I still only had the classical guitar.
Right. Okay.
With nylon strings, and of course I'm watching Eric, and he's kind of doing all this like twisting and pulling. And of course you're trying to do that on nylon strings, and he doesn't. You know, anyone that's tried, you can't bend nylon strings; it just doesn't work. So as soon as I got the electric, the Strat copy when I was 10, I realised that you could kind of go,
yeah,
or whatever, and then it kind of took me, you know, I was off then. Once I realised, oh yeah, now I've got the right guitar, I can actually do this. So that was the first solo I learned. I Shot the Sheriff, and it lasts about 5 minutes as well. And I learned every single note by pausing, running back, pausing, running back. I mean, this videotape was absolutely knackered by the time I'd finished. But you know,
did you go to school much then?
I did. I mean, I wasn't like mega into schooling. It was just one of those things you just do. You know, you go to school, don't you? And I was all right at it. You know, I didn't like skive off school or anything. I wasn't one of the bad kids. I wasn't one of the super like, you know, getting A stars and everything either. You know, when I was at school, I did everything to a decent standard, but my passion was music. So when I was sort of coming home with homework, I would kind of get the homework out of the way, and then I'd spend the evening playing my guitar, which is what I really wanted to do.
So from there, I got your first gig at 13, and then the next thing I could find was the album Messing with the Kid in 1996. So is that true? There was no other albums previous to that?
No, that was the first album. Yeah, I suppose that I did. The first time I'd ever been to a recording studio, actually. Yeah. Okay. Because what happened was I got my first, like, you know, I got this Red Strat when I was 12, and then I was off then, and I was like practicing and playing and stuff, and I was playing in like school concerts as like the lead guitarist, and I think I was 13, and I was playing in this school production of Joseph and his multicolored coat or something it was called. I can't remember that. And there was a guy in the audience who was one of the parents of one of the other kids, came up to me at the end and said, "Oh, right." He says, "Yeah." He says, "You're all right on that guitar, aren't you?" And he said, "Have you ever played a gig?" I didn't know what a gig was. I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Oh, have you ever played in a bar or a pub?" And I was like, No, never." He said, "Well, I've got a band." And he says, "And we're playing down at the Bull's Head on Friday night next week." He said, "I'll write you down the detail." He says, "Ask your parents to bring you down." He says, "And bring your guitar." He says, "And we'll get you up to play." So I went home and told my mum and dad, and says, "Oh, you know, this guy, you know, he's called Dave." He said I could go down. And so I remember we walked, I think it was about 3 miles to this pub, because didn't want to drive because my dad wanted to have a few pints. So we carried all this stuff 3 miles to the next village, and and I got up and played on a couple of tracks. And I didn't have a clue what I was doing, and because I'd never played in a band, I was just used to just playing the lead guitar stuff, which is what people seem to like. When I did it, people would kind of sort of sit up and take notice. And I think they got me up for 3 or 4 tracks, and I was terrified to be sort of stood there around all these, you know, old people. I was pretty shy and pretty timid, but I was there as long as I had my guitar. I was all right. And at the end of the night, they asked me to join the band. Says, "Well, we do this quite regularly, so if you want, you know, if you want to come along and your mum and dad want to bring you, we can have you. You can do this regularly." I was like, yeah, all right, okay. So that was like the next couple of years, and then I ended up just going around like the scene around the Midlands, just doing like sort of 60s and 70s covers and that sort of thing. But what I really wanted to play was blues, and so my dad had heard about some jam sessions that go on a couple of places in Nottingham, which is just up the road from here, on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. And I think I was probably like 50, maybe sort of 15, 16 by this point. And he took me up, and of course it was a blues jam session, like an open...
Is that the Running Horse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the first one, it was actually at the Old Vic
Okay.
on Fletchergate, which is now it's like an O'Neill's or something now, nightclub place. But yeah, it was there to start with at the Old Vic, and then it went to the Running Horse. I think about a year or a year and a half later, but I think it was on alternate nights. So I think the Old Vic was on Tuesdays and the Runner was on Wednesday. So there was so we'd actually start to go on Tuesdays. So every Tuesday and Wednesday night, me and my dad would get in the car, chuck the guitar and the amp in the boot, and we'd go up and I'd get up and play with all these old people because nobody my age, nobody like 15 or 16 back then, as I remember, it just didn't exist. Anybody my age who was even into playing solos, they were all into like I suppose like probably like Britpop and that sort of stuff.
Oasis and all that.
Yeah, which was kind of coming around, which is kind of more song based. You know, it's not really about guitar solos, is it? But all my mates at school were into that, so I was kind of like the odd one out. So the only way I could kind of vent this thing of needing to play solos and blues was to go to these jam sessions. And so yeah, it just became a regular thing. And then I ended up getting a band together with a drummer who used to go, a guy called Martin Steer, and he kind of coaxed me to kind of put a band together. And he just said, oh, you should get a band together, you should, do you sing? I was like, oh no, I don't sing, no. He says, well, you should. And I said, no, I don't want to sing. I just want to play guitar. And he said, well, look, he said, if you just play guitar, he says you'll play guitar, but he says you'll always be playing someone else's band. And he said, what do you want to do? He says, would you like to have your own band? This is where you can call the shots and decide what songs you play. I said, well, yeah, really. He says, if you're the singer, he says, then you're the boss. He says, it's your thing. He says, you're the front man. So he kind of twisted my arm, and I think there was a charity gig coming up where they were looking for bands to do like a half-hour set, and it was in like sort of 6 weeks from this particular conversation we're having. He says, look, all we got to do is get 5 or 6 songs together. He says, just practice. He says, we'll have somewhere else. He says, and just try singing. And I tried it at one of the jam sessions, and it was terrible. But he says, well, look, you've got this target to work to, 6 weeks. He said, let's just get a few covers together. Let's do a set. He says, and I'm sure you'll be fine. He says, I'll play drums. He says, we'll get someone to play bass. And he says, just tell me your 6 favourite songs that you like to play. And we just worked towards this deadline. And I did my first ever gig fronting a band and singing. And it's probably pretty terrible, to be honest. But the adrenaline kind of took over, and I kind of it kind of carried me through it. I was like nervous as hell leading up to it because I'd never done it before. I'd never sang in front of an audience. I'd never spoke down a mic. I'd never said good evening, everyone, all that kind of stuff, which you kind of, when you see somebody singing or on the mic, it's just, you don't think of all that stuff until you have to do it. It's like, if you've never sang at karaoke and then somebody throws you up, you hear your voice coming back through the speakers and you're like, whoa, that's weird. But that's what you sound like. So that whole insecurity thing I had to get over. And then we started doing a few gigs. And then, so Messing with a Kid, which was the first album in 96. So I'd have been 20 at that point. We'd probably been gigging for about a year, 18 months by that point. So that was the first sort of proper time I've been to the studio. I think we did the whole thing in like a day and a half or something.
And then the next one was Pay Attention, 97, which you had 3 songs on, yeah?
Well, yeah, because that was basically, we played the Running Horse in Nottingham was one of those regular kind of haunts. So a lot of the bands on the circuit would play, and we used to play it like every month, and it was always quite busy. It was always a good audience, and I started to get, people started to be into what we were doing, seemed to like what I was doing, and so we thought, well, let's record a live gig at the Runner. What better place, because it's such a great, anybody who's ever played there, I'm sure you have.
Yeah. When Barry was alive,
yeah, it was such an amazing atmosphere there, sort of grotty, dingy, tiny.
Did you ever sleep upstairs?
No,
because you lived in Leicester, didn't you?
Yeah.
I was down in Basingstoke, so we had to stay over upstairs.
Yeah, no, I never did, but I know because the dressing room was like down. You went down about 5 flights of stairs down to like some kind of like cave that went under the road, and it was but no, so we recorded the live thing there, but that live thing, pay attention, in '97, so I'd have been about 21 by that point. I'd written my first couple of songs, so we decided to do a mix of 5 or 6 live tracks from this gig at the Runner, and then we put 3 studio recordings on of these my first 3 songs I ever wrote, and those 3 songs are actually what got me my first record deal. That's kind of what started my professional full-time
Well, that's
thing.
what I was going to lead into, yeah, because that's when Ruf Records spotted you, and then took you on. So how was that from there? How'd they approach you?
Well, I'd done the Colne, the R&B festival at Colne a few years running, and we were going down well, and people seemed, I was building up a bit of a fan base or whatever, and I was starting to put more and more of my own songs. It was kind of this gently approach, rather than suddenly going from doing all blues covers to suddenly I'm going to go all original now and put all my. I would just shoehorn the odd song here and there in of my own, and they were getting as good a response as the covers. And then the guy that used to run the Colne Festival, was called Gary Hood, and I think he was friends with Thomas Ruf of Ruf Records in German. And I think he just sent the CD. He said, there's this young lad, he's coming, he's bit of a buzz about him at the minute, people really like him, and he's writing his own stuff. Check this out, check this album out. He's got a couple of his own songs. And Thomas, I think he flew in to come and watch me at this festival, and really, really liked it. And we just got talking, and he said, look, have you got any more like this? I said, yeah, I've got loads. I've got absolutely loads. So he says, right. He says, well, okay, what I think you should do is get a set together of all of your own stuff. And he said, and I'll come to another gig. He says, rehearse it. He says, and I want to hear more of your stuff. I want to hear it live, because Thomas is a really cool guy, but he's kind of, I suppose he's a bit of a hippie in a way. He's quite hippie-ish, and he's kind of got to feel the vibe, and he's got to feel the moment and all that sort of thing, which I totally get, because music's one of those things. It's, if something just grabs you, then music's a really powerful thing. And it's very different seeing something in a live context to listen to something on an album. So obviously he'd heard it on the album, heard a couple of my tracks at the Colne Festival. He wanted to hear a full set, live set. So I think we got booked onto the Guinness Blues Festival in Ireland, and we were there for the whole weekend, and we ended up with a residency at this bar, and it was a small bar. It's called the Old Dubliner, and you could probably get 70 people in there if you were lucky. It was tiny. It was a real squeeze, but Thomas flew in for that, and so he kind of came, and there was quite a lot riding on it. I was quite nervous, because I'm thinking, well, this guy's actually flying in to hear all of my original songs. And I thought, I wonder if he's going to like it. And also the audience, they're probably expecting to hear a few covers. We did do a few covers as well. But yeah, and at the end of the night, he just said, yeah, I said, love it. He said, let's talk when I get back to Germany. And that was that. We agreed to sign a deal together. I think I signed for 3 albums.
Right.
So that was back in '98. I think I signed in March '98. Or something like that, and the album came out in October, or it was recorded in October '98. So yeah.
Okay, and was it what you thought it'd be?
What, the recording, or
no, they're being part of a record company and being signed?
Well, it was one of those things, because, when I was growing up, the idea of actually doing music for a living, and that's your job, I don't know why. It just never occurred to me. I just never thought, oh yeah, I could do this for a job. I could go out and do gigs. And even though, I'd been doing all these gigs, first of all in these covers bands, these local covers bands, and then starting with my own thing when I was sort of 18 or so, and going out and doing gigs. The idea of actually doing it for a living just never occurred to me until Thomas offered me this deal. And I was actually, when I left school at 18, I did my A-levels, just because I thought at 16, well, I can't think of anything I immediately want to go and do in terms of work. So I thought, well, I might just stay at school, do my A-level. So that's what I did. But I wasn't really interested. I was just busy playing my guitar most of the time. And then when I left at 18, when I left school, I just got a job, just a regular job, like everyone does. I just thought, oh, well, you leave school, you get a job, you know. And I had a job where I had, you know, a monthly salary, company car.
What was you doing?
Well, just it was just like an office thing,
Oh,
you
okay.
know, just a generic, nothing exciting, you
Right.
know. I just got a job. That's what, because I thought that's what you do. You know, that's what, like my dad's always been a businessman. You know, my dad would always go out to work in the day. He always had a nice car. You know, my dad's always had nice cars, and he's always, you know, he's always gone out to work. So I just thought that's what you do. And then of course I got this offer of a record deal, and I thought, oh right, okay, oh great, I'll do both. But of course Thomas Ruf wanted me to go on tour that lasted, you know, these tours that last 3 months. And I thought, oh right, okay. I wonder if I can get unpaid leave. So I called a meeting with my boss, and he basically told me to get out. You're having a laugh, mate. He says, you're going to have to decide it's either that or this. And he was actually really supportive. My boss was great, actually. He was a really cool guy, and he was very supportive of my music. And he came to see me a few times as well. And he was, you know, when I'd sort of roll in half an hour late in the morning because I'd got in from a gig 3 hours before, he would kind of turn a blind eye. And he was, yes, I've got a lot to thank him for with that. And but then he, you know, he basically said, look, just go and do your music. That's what you love. That's what your passion is. Go and do it. And so, yeah, so that was 22 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm still here.
But you enjoyed the journey with Ruf Records.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was with Ruf for close on 10 years, but the thing is, like, when I suppose, yeah, kind of went off on a tangent there. Coming back to your original question, was it what I thought it would be? I didn't have any expectations. I didn't have loads of other record labels queuing up, you know, saying we want to sign you, we want to sign you. So I just, you know, I thought, well, this is what it is. You just, and I remember I got the contract looked at by, I don't know, the MU or something, and of course they say, oh, don't, whatever you do, do not sign this. Don't sign this contract. It's not in your favour. And of course you go backwards and forwards and you get some advice and stuff. But basically I went back to Thomas and I said, look, I've been advised not to sign this. And he said, look, I know it doesn't look good from your end, but he just said, look, you're an unknown artist. So he said, from my perspective, I've got to put a lot of investment into you, both financially and time and all this. And I'm kind of taking a risk, really. I'm taking a punt on it because I believe in what you do, but I've got to try and sell you as an artist. So he said, that's why the contract is like it is. And also you had to sign with his publishing as well and all this business stuff that, you know, typical musicians hate all that, don't really understand it. Well, I was always like that. I thought, well, I just want to play music, and if I can go and play music for a living, I'll just sign. And I did it. And it was not until sort of a lot later that I realised, you know, if I was going to go back, would I sign it? I'd probably hold out for try and bargain it in my favour a bit more.
So where did you make more money then? Was it through the gigging or through the album sales?
Well, I suppose, but I mean, the first 10 years really. So, yeah, from 98 to probably 2008, I made enough that I could keep doing it for a living, but it's probably mainly from the gigging and the touring and a bit from the albums. But a lot of the thing is with a record company is they're obviously investing a shed load of money into you, and they want to get that money back plus a load more. Otherwise there's no point in them doing it, right? And so of course all the albums, they were all done on a decent budget. I mean my first album that I did for Thomas in 98, he said, oh, I'm going to send you in to the studio with a producer. I didn't know what a producer was. I was like, what's one of them? And he says, oh, well, do a bit of research. He said, you know, a producer is basically, you know, oversees the whole thing, make sure it sounds good. And he said, I'm going to get a guy called Jim Gaines. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, right, okay. And I remember speaking to him, I said, oh, some guy called Jim's going to produce it. And my dad said, what's his name? Jim Gaines? I said, yeah, Jim Gaines or something like that. He said, hang on a minute. And he went into his cabinet with all these CDs, and he basically came out with a stack of CDs like this, and he slammed them on the table. Says, look at that. He says, produced by Jim Gaines, produced by Jim Gaines. He said, do you know who this guy is? I says, well, is he someone there? He says, yeah. He says he's produced, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Albert Collins, Carlos Sant. I was like, oh, wow. Okay, this is...
Better bring your A game.
This is serious stuff. So my first album, because those first 2 albums that I did before Thomas, this Messing and this live thing, that was all done just like on a kind of shoestring budget, like just a self-financed thing, where we probably printed, I don't know, like 400 or 500 copies. I don't think we ever reprinted them, so they just sold at the gigs. So it was never commercially available. But of course, signing to Thomas, and suddenly you're doing it properly, it's available worldwide. And you're doing things with a producer. You're going into a studio where you're not just making an album in a day and a half. You're actually spending a week and a half or 2 weeks making an album. I remember thinking, well, what do you do after the first day and a half? You've already done it all. But obviously you're doing it bit by bit. You're tracking it, and the producer's sort of saying, oh well, maybe let's take a verse out there and let's bring that 5.5 minute intro of that song. Let's shave a bit of that off because it's not really needed. Yeah.
What did you learn from Jim about miking your guitar?
I didn't learn. I'll be honest with you. I didn't learn a lot from Jim with that, because Jim, as I remember, I've worked with Jim twice now. I actually worked with him, I think 10 years later as well, on the Blues Caravan album, which I did in the States with Ian and Area. But no, with Jim is more of I would say he's a musical producer and mixer. As an engineer, I didn't actually see him do much engineering. There was an engineer at the studio that kind of did all the mic placement and that, and Jim kind of just oversaw the whole thing. Jim's really into getting the arrangement of his song good, picking a good take, the one that's got the fire and the energy over the the technical perfection or whatever, and obviously a producer's job of keeping things in budget, all that sort of thing. So when it came to the guitar sounds, I wasn't overwhelmed, if I'm honest, with the guitar sounds, because I just went and I thought I'll just leave everything to him. And of course I got the sound in the room that I was happy with, but it didn't, in my opinion, translate onto tape as well as I expected it to. But because he was Jim Gaines, you think, well, all of his resume is like all these big time guitarists. And then you think, well, maybe the reason those guitarists sound like that on that record is because they're so into their sound and their tone that they're not going to do a take until they're happy with it. Whereas when I worked with Jim, the first time at least anyway, I just waited until he went, right, go for it. And I was like, oh, right, okay. So I learned a lot of that stuff about how to get a good guitar sound later on.
Right. Okay.
Through a couple of cool people I worked with who really kind of had a good way of doing that. And also just from experimenting and just being fanatical about it myself. I'm a massive part of what I love, especially recording, is guitar sounds and guitar tones. And I'll spend most of my days, even when I'm not in the studio and when I'm not on the road, messing about with this stuff and trying different things. And but back then, I wasn't into any of that. I just wanted to play.
So what's your favourite mic placement then for recording?
My favourite mic placement? What, for a guitar? For a guitar?
Yeah, for guitar. Is it straight in front of the speaker or a little bit back for the room, a bit of space?
Well, I would normally I'd have a couple of mics. Okay. I'd get a close mic like an SM57.
Yeah.
And I'll never put it right up to the grill, because the way when you listen to a guitar amp, you haven't got your ear right next to the speaker grill. You've got you're kind of around. But obviously, you want to get that mic, that immediacy that you get with a close mic. So it's probably normally around about so far away. So there's a bit of air around it. And I will start between the center of the cone and the edge. So I'll start sort of halfway between that. And then just experiment. So a lot of time when I'm tracking in the studio, I will do my actual performance stuff in the control room. So what I'm hearing is the sound of the guitar coming out of the studio monitors rather than the actual amp. So I'm trying to get the same sound coming out of the monitors as what I'm hearing when I'm in the room with the amp. And until I can get that, I don't go any further. And I will spend quite a while sometimes just moving a mic, and it sounds, really over the top, but just like a close mic, if you move it half an inch to the left or half an inch to the right or further in or further away, it's going to make a difference. So I will do that and just find the sweet spot of that mic, and then I'll just have a room mic, an ambient mic, and maybe another one 2-3 feet away. And a lot of it is just moving stuff around until what I'm hearing out of the monitors is as close to the natural sound of the amp that I'm getting. Because what I don't want to do is just get put the mic any older, and then this whole thing of we can EQ it later and we can fix it later. Because the way I see it is if you get the sound as close as you can at source, so before you add any mixing or EQ or anything like that, if you've already got a really, really good sound, you don't have to do a lot later, and it's more inspiring to play to as well.
You can't polish a turd, basically.
No, you can't.
That's great, man. But what about phase issues between the two mics?
So yeah, I mean, you've obviously got. I mean, you can flip the phase on stuff, and you've also got this thing where you can line them up. So if you've got one mic that's say 3 inches away, another one's 4 inches away, you're going to get a problem. So you want to have them kind of sort of in equal measures. And once you get into room mics and that, because they're so far away, you're not as much of a problem.
Well, you need the space as well for the distance. If you try and move them on Pro Tools or anything, then you're taking away the effect that you're trying to get anyway.
Well, exactly, yeah. And I think it's one thing that I've learned with guitar sounds, just in general, is the room acoustics play a huge part. Just going into a room and setting up your favorite rig and your favorite amp, pedal, guitar, whatever, and a sound or a setup that and moving the amp around the room, pointing it in different angles, just it sounds really good in that part of the room, because all these things you learn as you go along. And when you start out, you don't know any of this stuff, or most people don't, at least. And the one thing I was always frustrated with, certainly on the first few records I made, was I didn't like the guitar sound. I thought it doesn't sound as good as what I get live. And so I started to get into the thing of like, right, the next time I record, I'm going to spend a while on this. And I do now, it's, it's quicker now because I know what I'm doing. But yeah, all that kind of stuff, you just learn as you go along, and you're kind of chipping bits away all the time to kind of like hone your craft, aren't you?
What's your favourite guitar riff off that album then?
My favourite guitar riff
off that album, Aynsley Lister, with Jim Gaines.
I can't even remember that album. So long ago. My favourite guitar riff.
Yeah, you must have a song on there that you think, yeah, that's pretty kicking.
I don't know. What songs are even on it? I suppose. Well, Soundman.
Quick Google.
Yeah, Google. Yeah, I should name my own album, shouldn't I? I didn't know you were going to ask me that. Well, I suppose Soundman is a pretty cool one, because even now I get asked, people still want it, and I still play it from time to time.
How's that go then? You got your guitar?
It's not really it's like a sort of a Texas type, Stevie Ray type thing. It's going to sound really weird without a band, but and the actual riff, there's not really a lot to it. It basically goes, so it's like a shuffle. So the band's kind of going. So that's like the bass line.
Yeah.
And then the guitar riff over the top basically goes.
No, but what was you then? 21, 20?
Yeah.
Coming up with that stuff, and that's great, man.
It's it's just, I suppose it's that thing of I was into Clapton before I was into the Stevie Ray thing.
Yeah.
Which I think, in my opinion, is a good thing, because I think certainly when I was in my teens, I started to notice there was quite a lot of guys in the States that were coming out, younger guys, that were doing the Stevie Ray thing.
So about Kenny Wayne Shepherd's first album, and
yeah, and I just thought, and there was a few other guys that were going for that kind of Texas, that kind of shuffle, and I thought, yeah, which was actually what made me buy a Les Paul.
Right. Okay.
So that first album, that Aynsley Lister, that debut for Ruf Records, there's quite a lot of Les Paul on there, just because I didn't want to kind of be lumped in that camp with. I mean, Stevie Ray Vaughan was obviously immense, wasn't he? But he did that, and I didn't want to be seen as the English version, another copyist of what he was doing. So when I wrote Soundman, there's definitely a nod there to that kind of or whatever, but yeah, I mean, it's not really a riff. It's kind of I don't know if there is any riffs on that album. Riffs, I don't know. The riffs kind of came a bit later. There was a cool riff on the following album, which was called Everything I Need, and the opening track from that starts with like I mean, I'm obviously at home. I've got no distort. I'm just plugged into a clean ampere, so I've got no distortion.
That's all right.
So the riff basically goes kind of ZZ Toppy, played on a Les Paul with a load of kind of grit, and that was a pretty cool riff, I think, for the time. And again, I probably couldn't write that now, because I think of music in such a different way.
Well, next, I was going to say next on your list, because I've got loads to try and get through with this stuff. We'll get to that. I've got you in with Delbert McClinton in 2006. What was that like? Yeah.
Wow, God, you have done your research, haven't you? Well, Delbert McClinton was one of my dad's favourite artists. He was always playing him. And I didn't really know who he was. He's just this guy, this great singer who I would hear on the home stereo. And obviously by this point, I'd kind of left home and stuff. But I was in the States just visiting some friends of mine who were like a sort of a blues band that would kind of just tour in the holiday period. And they would invite me over and I'd go and sit in with them, as they say over there. And I just travel around with them for 5-6 weeks as a guest guitarist from England, if I had a bit of a break in my touring over here. And they were doing one festival where Delbert McClinton was on. And the lead singer, who was the lead singer in the band I was with, he was one of the co-organisers. And I sort of said to him, I said, do you reckon you could introduce me to him? I said, I'd love to just shake the man's hand. I said, maybe get his autograph. I said, my dad's a really big fan. I said, he's got all of his albums, and I said, and I know all of his stuff because it's always playing. Whenever I go around to my parents, he's always on. He says, oh yeah, sure. And I said, do you reckon there's a chance I could get up and play? And he says, I don't know, but he says, we can certainly ask. He says, you don't get what's the worst thing that can happen, And so he introduced me to her, and I went backstage, and Delbert was just having his lunch, and he was a very courteous, very gracious man, and he just says, nice to meet you, blah blah blah. And I said, look, I know this is a bit, forward, but I said, do you ever have people sit in with you? I said, I would absolutely love to get up and play on a number with you. I said, but it's all right. I said, I understand if that's not, that's not okay. And then my friend Carl, this singer from the band I was with, basically kind of stepped in and he obviously knew Delbert because he'd been involved in booking him. I think he'd worked with him a few times over the years as well. Basically just said some really nice things about my playing, and basically said, he can play, he knows what he's doing, and he won't embarrass you. And, if you get him up, it won't do you any harm, sort of thing. And Delbert was just like, yeah, sure, man. I was like, wow. And I kind of just went off, and I was like, wow, I was on cloud nine,
Did you ring your dad?
What's that?
Did you ring your dad?
Well, no, but fortunately somebody filmed it. And he didn't just have me up for one number. Initially he was just getting me up for one number, but then when he heard me play, he kept me up for the rest of the set. So and his guitarist, forgetting his name now, he didn't get hardly any solos at all. Delbert was giving them all to me. And I felt kind of bad for that, but then his guy sort of came up and says, he says, it's cool, man. He says, don't worry. He says, you sound good, and I enjoyed listening to you. And he says, I get to play this stuff every night. And he said he must have liked you playing. He says he doesn't normally have people up for a whole set. So, but yeah, like I say, somebody recorded it, and I basically came back to the UK. And the next time I saw my parents, I just said to my dad, I says, stick that in the video recorder. Watch that. And yeah, I was quite proud of that. Yeah, it's kind of cool,
2007, Upside Down. That was the first one produced by yourself.
Yeah. Well, that was okay. So by this point, I've been with Thomas for, well, yeah, 9 years by this point. And Thomas had taken on more artists by this point. And of course, when I first signed to him, it was probably about 12, 13, maybe 14 artists on his label. And by this point, he'd probably got like 30 or 40. And I just, it's like all these things, relationships deteriorate over time. And although mine and Thomas's relationship was still okay, I just felt like, the money was being spread thinner and thinner. So, of course, you've only got this one pot of money. When you've got 12 artists, you divide it between 12 artists. When you've got 30 or 40, there's less money to go around. So, of course, yeah, there was kind of corners being cut, in my opinion.
Was Ian with them at that point still?
Was what, sorry?
Was Ian with them at that point?
Yes, he was, yeah, because it was actually the previous year when we done the Blues Caravan thing together.
Right.
So I think Ian had only been with Thomas for about 3 years at that point. I remember Ian actually phoning me up, probably around about 2002, 2003, and saying, look, I'm thinking of signing to Ruf Records. What do you think? And we were having a bit of sort of chat about it. And I told him what my experience was. And at that point, it was good. But yeah, so Upside Down, there was the budget of being like really kind of nailed down to a lot less than I'd been recording with, say, 9 years previous. The budget was like half, if that. There was no budget for a producer. There was no budget for any mastering, and it was all kind of just trying to get as much out of nothing. And I was getting more and more frustrated. And Thomas didn't have a producer lined up. Didn't really have a plan. And it was one of those things I thought, well, I thought, well, there's no producer. What do I do? And I thought, well, I'll do it myself. I'll produce it myself. And so I did. And it then ended up being my job to find a studio, negotiate a good daily rate, get some musicians, obviously write the stuff. That's obviously what you do as an artist anyway. But and then oversee the whole thing, oversee the mixing, and it was really quite stressful. But I didn't really have much of a choice. And when if I go back to that album, I think it's got some good stuff on it. But I think it would have benefited the producer probably. But that was the last album I actually did for Thomas. And then we parted company. And it was on good terms. It was on, I don't like all these things,
It's water under the bridge, isn't it?
Well, I don't see any sense in falling out with people because, he'd obviously changed the way he wanted to run his record label. Like when I first signed with him, there's a lot of money being put into me as an artist in promotion, marketing, all these sort of things, because it's almost like I was the latest thing. So he was like, I was super excited that he got Aynsley on the label. But 9 years later, there's some other new guys that he's got, or some other young girl that he's got signed to his label. And I felt like it was a bit of an afterthought. So, we parted on good terms. And then I signed to a UK label.
Yeah, Alan Robinson.
Yeah. And so that's kind of when that happened. That was in 2008,
I think on here it says.
2008, 2009, yeah.
Yeah. And how was that experience?
That was good, yeah. Because also throughout all of this, I'd never had a manager as such. So when I signed to Thomas's label, some of his bigger artists, some of the big American guys like Walter Trout, who he had as long as
Eric
I was.
Bibby had at some point, didn't he?
Yeah, I think at one point. They've all got managers that take care of all the business and book the tours. When I was with Thomas, there was agencies that would book the tours, but all the management in terms of having a strategy for having an artist career, there wasn't really any. And I just started to get really burnt out with the whole thing around 2008. And again, it was coming to the end of the road with me and Thomas. So, and I've been speaking with Alan Robinson, and Alan and Thomas know each other. So, Alan said, "Look, I'm interested in getting involved with you in a management capacity. I think I can really kind of, take your career off on another level. And I have a record label as well, conveniently.
Manhattan,
so
yeah.
Manhattan Records, and I did two albums with Alan, and he did again the same thing. Like when I first signed to Thomas, there was a lot of excitement there to us working together because it was a new thing. Alan had suddenly got a new project he could get his teeth into, and you know we worked together for what would it have been, 4 years or so, 4 years, and it was cool. But again, you know, it's like all these things, it's nothing bad, but you know, I suppose other people come along and then they're the latest thing, or
Well, I think it was Alan Nimmo next, wasn't it? King.
yeah, he basically he sort of signed King. I even remember Alan phoning me up and talking to me about it and saying, "Oh, have you heard of King?" I said, "Oh yeah," and I said, "You know, I know all the guys from King. You know, Lindsay Coulson was actually my bass player.
Yeah.
For about 2 years in the early days. So, and the Nimmo brothers, and Wayne, who was the drummer a bit later on, I think actually. But Wayne Proctor was played drums in my band for the first 3 years of my professional career. So it's quite incestuous, as you know.
Yeah.
There's everyone knows everyone, and but yeah. So you know, I was with Alan for 4 years. That was cool. You know, we did a couple of albums of Studio One, and then a live in session type thing called Tower Sessions.
Yeah. And did you produce them, or did you have a producer work with you on them once?
Okay, so Equilibrium, which was the first album I did for Alan, that was produced by Steve Darrell Smith, who is the guy that runs the studio I was recording at, down in Ringwood. And he's got a studio called Room with a View.
Okay.
And he's got access to a lot of kind of session players. And Alan's vision for this album was to go into the studio without my touring bands, just me and some demos of songs I'd written, and work with people I've never met before and just throw it out there and hand it over to Steve, the producer, and let him guide me through it. I'd never done that before. I'd always worked with my touring band, but I thought, well, you know what? Why not? You know, in a creative context, you know, you've got to be prepared to step outside the box a bit and just try new things, because if you do everything the same way every time, you're never going to move on, are you? So I thought, yeah, I'll do that. And we ended up with Robbie McIntosh. he came in to play bass actually, but I was not happy with him only playing bass. Especially, he was a little bit more expensive than the other guy, so I says, well, we better give him a guitar, make sure he plays some guitar as well. But he was a really nice guy, and you know, an incredible musician. He'd actually just got off the John Mayer tour.
Right, okay.
Which I'd been watching the John Mayer Where the Light Is DVD about a month or two before this studio session, and of course, all I knew was on, you know, tomorrow, which would have been the next day. We got another. The guy who'd been playing bass at the start of the session couldn't make it, so Steve was going to get someone else. He says, "But don't worry." He said, "This guy says a little bit more expensive. He says he's really, really good. Don't worry." And of course, in walked Robbie. I was like, "I've been watching you on DVD, playing next to John Mayer." And he was like, "Oh yeah." And he was the most down to earth guy, just an incredible musician. And like I say, he came in to play bass, but we got him to play some guitar as well. And that was cool. And there was some other great session players that kind of came in and did bits and pieces. And I'd never worked like that before, so it was a different album, a step in a different direction.
And you happy with it?
Yeah, it was very different to what I'd done before. Probably the most commercial album I'd done to that point. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue down that path. It was, you know, I think the first mixes that Steve actually did, the producer guy, he'd made it quite, not poppy, but there was a lot of kind of like, all the guitars were quite sort of quiet in the mix. All the sort of edgy, gritty stuff that I like and kind of what I do was kind of softened. And all the vocals and all the oohs and ahs and the la la la's, whatever, all, you know, lots of acoustic guitars and that sort of thing. I suppose a bit John Mayer-y in a way. And so that first mix, that's how it sounded to start with. It wasn't a bad. It was a really, really good mix, but I didn't think we could release it like that, because I thought if we release it like that, it's going to be so different to what people know me as, that I'm probably going to alienate half of my followers. So we kind of took a halfway house, bringing some of the gritty guitars back in and just cooling down on the nice jangly kind of kind of acoustic guitar-y stuff. So we kind of went halfway. And yeah, I suppose when I listen back to it, it's quite a clean sounding album. It's not as gritty and grungy as I would probably do these days. But like I say, you've got to try these things as an artist. You've got to find who and where you are. And if you don't try that, you might try something. You might think, oh, this is what I should have been doing all along. Or, in my case, yeah, that was cool. I enjoyed it. I like the elements of working with different musicians and different people coming in and just bringing their creative input. Hearing a demo and then literally half an hour later you're actually doing a take. There's a real immediacy to that, and I really like that. But I also, it was, I suppose, elements of it for me probably a little bit too clean and nice.
Right, okay. That was Aynsley Lister, part 1. Part 2's coming next Wednesday at 7 o'clock right here on Tommy Allen Music. Until next week, a word from our director.
Bye.